But the levels of inequity in New Zealand are significant. So if you're Māori, Pacifica, with disability from a rural or remote community, former refugee or migrant, if you're a girl, if you're from a low socioeconomic region, you will have less access to physical activity and you will be participating less hours per week. It's not right. Anyone's missing out because of their background, and we must address that at the root cause. So that's why we exist as a trust, to understand those barriers, remove them, give everyone an equal opportunity to receive the wider benefits of physical activity.
Feeling really fortunate to have Ed Shuttleworth in the office today at Bronte Studios. Ed's just come off a 210-kilometre run, which took him around 40 hours to get from Farewell Spit in New Zealand right across to Nelson, which is across our beautiful province. And he did that for charity. I understand he recently lost his mother and he's very touched by the support that he got from the Nelson Hospice. Ed's raised a considerable amount of money through his run. It's actually just put the spotlight on a guy who's got a pretty fascinating background anyway. So I thought we'd get him in the room and see what we could extract out of him about actually living up to your goals, making no excuses along the way. Ed, it's great to have you here today. Congratulations on an enormous feat, 210K across the region with the Tākaka Hill right in the middle. That's a phenomenal mountain range. And tell me, you've recovered well?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I have recovered, but it's still on my mind every day. There's a physical element. I'm fine, I'm not injured, but my body's still telling me to go easy. I went for a jog with the boy on Saturday, it was fine, then pushed a bit on Sunday and it was like, no, ease off.
Yeah.
For 4 weeks passed and I would say I'm fine, but then clearly there's some effects still there. Probably big as being more just like mentally, emotionally, processing it. I really want to use that, not fast track. So I've actually been sitting in that space quite a lot about what I learned that I want to.
So can we share us? I'm dying to know now. What are you going to do something about?
Yeah, well, the run showed me that's the best I've been in my life when I've had that clarity of purpose.
Yep.
It's probably the first time I've been really proud of a piece of work.
Yep, it's been
a long time. Now that may reflect on me and maybe I should be more, but my standards are high. I was at my best. The purpose was real.
Yep.
It meant saying to me, I was willing to go far beyond. It just shone a light on how that's not a one-off in my life, how I need to make that 7 days a week.
Living on purpose, mate. There's something really magical about living on purpose, eh?
For me, it's not been defaulting and thinking back to my real life. That run was my real life. You know, this is not my real life. So what I want to do, everyone's like, how's it get back to real life? It's like, no, that's not the point. The point is that was the closest you're going to get to the real Ed.
So you felt really authentic.
Yeah, that was me. I was out there doing something I believed in, suffering good and bad, no fake, no corporate. So that's me. That's me raw, unfiltered. And I was at my best then. That is my normal, not a one-off event. That's what I want to replicate now.
Maybe if I look at your history, look at your past, you're a guy who got into, obviously raised in London, that's correct. And then when you did finally get into the workforce after school, it sounds like you moved into finance, corporate financing, venture capital type financing.
Yeah. So the journey was, I wasn't really sure what to do and followed a line of thinking what success was around investment banking. Worked for Coates, a private investment bank in the UK. I then worked in corporate investment banking around derivatives. Did 5 or 6 years and looked around. The more I went up the chain, the further I saw a level of unhappiness. So I got to step away from this. I was working at UBS, a pretty flash job 1 week. And the next week, I wasn't really sure how to do it, but I knew I cared about physical activity. I had no idea there was even an industry. The only job I knew I could see was cleaning in a gym. So I went from investment banking to cleaning in a gym and cleaning treadmills and everyone's, what was your story? And I had some interesting chats, but it was really good actually. It got an insight and then I was like, what is the industry? And I worked for Virgin Active for a while, run a few of their gyms, which was cool.
That's the Virgin brand, Branson.
Yep. And then I got invited to run a gym out of Kuwait for the royal family there. And I still hadn't quite hit the mark of what mattered to me. I was in physical activity, but my interest really was at the heart of giving people an opportunity. When I look back at my childhood, the happiness, the success, the best moments were the moment of going to play cricket with my dad or doing something with my brother, playing in the garden, a bit of football. And I just saw a lot of benefit. I got mentoring from people in adult teams when I was a kid that I'd have never got through school. I got education and lessons in life that I wasn't getting through school. School didn't really interest me that much. I saw a platform that, if provided right, can be incredible. Half the kids at school dreaded it. The other half embraced it, and it really opened.
Mate, nothing's changed there, is it? I mean, you can relate to that now as a CEO of Sport Tasman.
Yeah, and I take that responsibility seriously. positive for all, and how do you make that experience accessible for all? And then meandered into working in cricket, turned up in New Zealand, in Nelson. My wife's from the North Island, but I'd never been to the South Island. Went on Google Maps, thought it looked like a nice place. Didn't have accommodation, stayed at a dock hut for 10 days. I'm going to try and find a job here. And yeah, I started at Nelson Cricket, really interesting organisation. Never worked harder, and I really respect those small community organisations. Teach you something to everyone. They never operate on all levels of the scale. And the career really started from there and got picked up by New Zealand Cricket, and then a main part of my career with the ICC, the International Cricket Council, where I was heading up cricket for him.
You were dealing with the amateur New Zealand ranks, were you? Growing the cricket brand in New Zealand?
Yes, I was
And
the community.
getting at a grassroots level, which is much what you're doing now. You've been a very grassroots man right through your career, as far as I can see. You've liked interacting with the people that are making a difference on the ground, which is that's a unique
focus. The bright lights are always around the professional game. And I'm a sports fan. My interest is, what is that opportunity for that child and how does it enhance their lives? And when done well, it's incredible. It transforms individuals, families, communities, brings them together. So yeah, did that with cricket. And then to a slightly lesser extent with the ICC, my job was to look after those countries who were fully flourished professional nations at cricket, bring the game to 100 new countries, and ended up overseeing the 5 continental offices for the ICC from Nelson. Interesting job, shocking time zone, shocking travel, massive privilege, but I felt very detached from the community.
Yep.
And felt many layers away from what mattered to me, which was that opportunity for the child. Children getting a bit older. My children are 7 and 9 now, and my focus was, rather than just believe about it, do something about it.
Yeah.
And that's how I entered into the sport role 2 years ago. Yeah.
From my research, it seems like that's how you entered into the whole role of being sports. Like you were in that corporate world, and then ending up in Kuwait with the royal family. I mean, that's quite a world away from the financial world, which you obviously trained in. And then you moved your training. I mean, that's what fascinates me about people that can actually shift from, just being locked into one known. They're just locked into this one known. It's what I do, and I couldn't change it. And being able to set a goal and chase a goal and achieve a goal, that takes certain traits. I'm always trying to uncover what those traits are, what drives you, whether it's 210 Ks or whether it's I'm going to change my career, I'm going to do something completely different. You know what I mean? Like,
it was really interesting to me how much my title at a bank defined me. So I was quite deliberate in giving that up. I was lucky to give it up before I was locked. Before I was locked into a mortgage, schools, kids, but I backed myself. I was like, I'm not an investment banker. And if I'm playing in a treadmill, there was a bit of an ego hit there. And it took a bit of a readjustment in my life to make sure status from a job was relevant to me. From then on, I've backed myself to only commit when I'm all in.
Yep.
And believe in it.
So that's one of the keys is commit. So many people take on so many different things and they never do any of them. But once you're all in and you're there, then just commit.
If I could go back and talk to my younger self, everyone talks about what career you're going to do, what you're studying, but it's those honest conversations about what you're passionate about, what you're willing to sacrifice, what you're willing to fight for, what you're willing to go above and beyond because you believe in and you're okay to raise your voice about and talk about, and so that's, for me, I didn't hit that point until 28. I see some kids from 10, I see others who go their whole life and never do it. I wish I could bottle that. I often look at what we're teaching children, look at for my kids who are 7, 9, but I look at uni and I look at what's in a sports management degree and how that compares to my job. Yes.
So what's the direction for Sports Tasman? I mean, under your guidance, you've taken it on and you brought some initiative. Where do you see it going regionally?
The Trust historically had a high level of events and facilities. Our purpose as an organisation is everyone active. And by that, I mean, we've got to really focus on who's missing out and why. Our job's not to deliver that, but to play a leadership role across the sector. So we need to work with councils, education, health, iwi, schools, funders, sports. How are we going to provide a more aligned system so every child has a good experience and has an experience that's accessible and is good enough they come back to have a lifelong affiliation with sport? And so what we're trying to do is we provide that leadership, that coordinated way of bringing everyone together, putting the child at the center of the experience and making sure that in our community, if there is a barrier that's stopping a child being active, we understand it, the right people are around it, and we're working towards it together. In our region, we have the highest levels of physical activity in the country in terms of who is accessing and the number of hours per week, which is fantastic and is down to a lot of incredible work. Volunteers is definitely a key word in New Zealand. compared to if you went around the world, they would be in awe at the volunteer system here, and we often take that for granted. But on top of that, the levels of inequity in New Zealand are significant. So if we were to look at the data in this region, whilst being the highest region, if you're Māori, Pacifica, with disability from a rural or remote community, former refugee or migrant, if you're a girl, if you're from a low socioeconomic region, you will have less access to physical activity and you will be participating less hours per week. And if we believe and know, the data tells us if you're physically active, it's supporting you in life through a number of metrics, nothing to do with sport. It's not right. Anyone's missing out because of their background, and we must address that at the root cause. So that's why we exist as a trust, to understand those barriers, remove them, give everyone an equal opportunity to receive the wider benefits of physical activity. And that can be anything. In the school system, we know those children who are doing physical activity have higher rates of literacy, numeracy, and attendance. Right? What is the role of sport in health? What is the role of sport in any system in our community? How does it bring together people, families, communities? So that's our job as a trust. We are trying to bring all the vital cogs of sport, physical activity, active rec and play together and remove the barriers.
We have a saying, which you'll know, is kids in sport stay out of court. I think there's so much evidence that, it's almost just a fact, really, isn't it? And what are the greatest challenges you face here in the region?
Well, it's an interesting aspect because of how many people are involved. The sector is not defined. So my impressions coming into New Zealand and working here is, I see it as the physical activity sector, but there is no strategy for physical activity. If I think of who in our region is involved with physical activity, there are so many different parties, but there is no coordinated plan. The biggest challenge for me is, could we find a way for schools, sports, council, funders, any provider, agreed fundamentals of child first and an experience first, rather than us all looking after ourselves and working in silos and pockets. So that's probably the biggest challenge at the moment, a coordinated approach that puts the child at the heart of the experience.
It's an interesting concept, like coordinating all of the different networks of sport. Like, imagine if you could achieve that under one umbrella. So you would remove all the administration required around the sport. If you could actually support them with the administrative side of it, the volunteers would then be able to spend more time on the front lines with the kids than actually having to deal with all the administration at the back. So is that something you're thinking of?
Well, the key is, if we agree on the fundamentals, we're not in competition. If I'm thinking from a child's perspective, they should not have to choose if to play X or Y.
Well, it never really occurred to me that you'd be in competition, but you did right. I can see how clubs would think they're in competition. Remember,
the research shows the best outcomes for children, both in terms of physical activities and welfare and performance, is a child playing as many sports as they can till they're 16. And yet, we know sports are asking for specialisation early. So what we need to do is put the child at the centre of the experience rather than the organisation who's providing it. Our job is really to provide that leadership and support to have an aligned approach that puts the child first. In doing that, there will be loads of opportunities for collaboration, sharing and efficiencies, like you say. But the starting position, and the great thing about the region at the moment, is everyone's got that intent. So we're all saying, we could do something really special here by having this strategy and philosophies that we can buy into. And we're still independent, but we know deep down what's going to stand true, whether you're playing sport, playing netball, football, cricket, sideline behaviour. What are the principles? Seasonal balance. How do we get children to do everything? Parent behaviour. All these elements that a child shouldn't experience a different experience by code, by experience. It should know they get a high level of professionalism that ensures their experience of sport's good.
That's great, mate. I can imagine providing support to volunteer coaches in different sports, because coaching is coaching, isn't it? Getting the best out of people is not about the sport. It's about getting the best out of people.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm really interested in is, as an immigrant to New Zealand, you came in from the UK system of selling houses. So what was your overall property experience coming to New Zealand with you and your partner?
So I have to call out straight up, it wasn't an assumption growing up in London that you'd ever own a property.
Oh, yeah?
Most of my friends who are incredibly successful will never get to afford a property. So mindset's important in this conversation. The first home I ever bought was in New Zealand. So it presented an opportunity for me that I wouldn't have had in London in my career.
Awesome.
Very grateful.
The great New Zealand dream of owning a home,
And those challenges we know are growing, and there may be pressures. It's still always worth remembering and recognising that it was still possible for me, and it wasn't in my country. Yeah, well, our journey was 10 days in the dock hut.
Yeah.
understand the system, Google it, work it out.
Cheap accommodation, isn't it?
Yeah, bought an annual pass, love the outdoors, which is why we moved to Nelson. Just did a 10-day trip with a bit of research.
Yep.
Rented for a year, tried to work out the area.
Yep.
Felt we were going in very blind. How do you know an area without living in it? You can't get that information. It's
Because your wife was from the North Island, but which part was she from?
from Northland. Yeah.
North Island. Well, you couldn't get much further away.
And it was interesting to me that she'd never been to the South
Mm.
Island. So, yeah, we arrived and did not know the region, did not know anything about it. We came here because we saw a beautiful location. I love the mountains. I love the sea and the concept of it. I thought this was a place I wanted my family to grow up. So that was the vision. We arrived from Kuwait, got the ferry, drove in. I remember arriving in Aotearoa, tide was out. I was like, that's not the picture I saw online, which clearly had been Able Tasman, and tried to figure that out. And then after 1 year of renting, bought our first property here.
Yep.
Bought in Stoke.
Do you mind me asking? I mean, I've always felt, because over the 20 years that I was selling real estate, I'd see people come in and say, you need to rent and then get 12 months under your belt. So exactly what you're talking about. But what I always noticed was wherever the person rented, like they end up putting their roots down there. Their kids went to the school there. So if they rented over in Mott, they would always end up buying in Mott. You could almost guarantee they'd buy from 150 metres from the rental. You know what I mean? So tell me, did you end up buying in that location?
No, so we rented in Aotearoa.
Yeah.
We bought in Stoke.
Okay. There's some distance there.
Lived there or owned that property for 10 years. Even when we went back overseas, we kept that property, which I can come back to. So that was our journey.
So you ended up back. So you kind of proved me right. So that's good, Ed. I'm pleased about that.
That was a decade.
It just took a decade. Only took you a decade.
It's like.
And so you kept the house in Stoke when you were overseas?
Yeah, so when my mum was sick back in the UK, when they had tough. The process was we bought the house here. Then I got offered a job by New Zealand Cricket in Christchurch.
Yep.
We loved Nelson and thought we don't want to let that go. And we loved our home. We had a 1920s. Kept that, moved down to Christchurch to Lincoln where New Zealand Cricket was based. And then my mum got sick, took the call, I need to be back in the UK and make sure I'm there for my mum and support her. And that was where the link to hospice was, that there wasn't really an equivalent hospice that she felt comfortable with. So I cared for her at home, which was a big challenge. And we relocated our family to go back and support my mum, which was a brilliant decision, but it was a big decision. So we left the country for 4 years and rented our property in Nelson out for 4 years whilst we were away.
What was it like when you got back? Was it good condition? Or?
No, it was terrible. A really bad experience, yeah, which I wouldn't wish on anyone. And the big picture, we knew we'd done the right thing. The market had shifted here. And
you still had property in the market. You moved with the market.
Yeah, and we came back, renovated the property, invested 1.5 years in it, lived in it, and then sold and moved to our new property 4.5 years ago.
Fantastic.
Yes. So our timings were well, even though there were some big blitz in the middle of it. Yeah. You know, I mean, and the reality is it was tough. You worked hard. When I moved to Christchurch, we tried to sell our house here and couldn't.
You tried to sell it here?
Tried and sold and couldn't.
Really? What years were that?
So that would have been about 2013.
There was a bit of a slowdown around
and then we had rent and a house that we were trying to not rent up here at the time yet because we wanted to present a certain way, and worked really hard, you know, for a couple of years to maintain their property in the Nelson market. And that continued when I was back in the UK looking after my mum as well. You know, it was really big struggle for us to maintain that property, but yeah, achieved it. Yeah. And we're then very fortunate with timing and worked that situation. Yeah.
But the thing was, you did the hard yards and you held on to the property no matter what. And that's what a lot of people don't see, is all the sacrifice that you make in life. People never see the sacrifice you make to get the win. So there's been a lot of sacrifices, a lot of moving on for you. It's like you haven't been scared to see your next opportunity, whether it's with New Zealand Cricket or ICC. You've always been prepared to bite the bullet and go with a bit of blind faith and not be limited by the fear of what could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. At Prebbleton, we were living just now this big job for New Zealand Cricket. I was real proud of it. We were living in a garden shed. So we were at this fancy house and we rented off them. No knocking the people. Beautiful house. I just had their shed. And they were making money on a good house by renting out the shed. It was achieved by looking forward. And my approach to travel was always the same. I'm really proud of where I grew up. My dad's from the worst place on Monopoly, Old Kent Road. And my mum's kind of in between, kind of Fulham way. She was from Ireland, had a tough life, and they had nothing. I suppose all I heard from them was go out, don't hold yourself back for us. And I've always been a bit torn by that. There's a part of me that's, oh, I wish I lived on the same street as that. I am really committed to family. Like,
Mate, well, 4 years going back and just stopping your life and spending that with your mum, I mean, that's a huge commitment, isn't it? You know?
Yeah.
And it speaks to the caliber of your willingness to commit, like you did to the run, like you have to cricket, like you have to Sport Tasman. I mean, it's a more selfless approach to living your life.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It weighs on me that, you've got the whole world. And I do look at things on a global level. I've always approached jobs, and if you're willing to travel or sacrifice, it accelerates everything. That's my view. I took a job in Kuwait with the royal family. I had no idea what I was turning up. Rocked up, no knowledge. But what's the worst that can happen? That created a platform where I met my wife. Then I took a job at Nelson Cricket. Hardest job of my life, worked for nothing. Got identified, picked up at New Zealand Cricket. Got offered an incredible job through Dubai. Went there, no idea how it was going to play out. 8 years later, I've had the most amazing career through it. Every single one of them was an unknown.
That's right.
Right back to cleaning the treadmills. I try and create a space where you can think for the future and it's not reactionary. I'm trying to create a platform where I can try things, and the worst case scenario is not hinder him. Try and be brave in that. And I noticed that just with career. If I was willing, if I just stayed and waited for my boss to leave.
Well, we wouldn't be here now.
No,
You wouldn't have run 210K.
Yeah.
You know.
I'd be a duty manager in a gym in South London. That's what I'd be doing.
And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But some people are driven, and that's why you're here, because you're driven to get out there and make change and do things.
Yeah.
And I think that's inspiring. So we should round today's session out by just coming back to your work with the hospice, and what you've achieved there is just phenomenal. And it goes on. There's a short film coming out. I've seen the trailer. It's spectacular. I think it'd be really good to round it out and talk about the hospice, what you see for the hospice, how people can help the hospice, and give us a bit of a sell on the hospice while you're here.
Yeah. So I sat in the hospice and listened to a presentation about the challenge.
Yep.
And became immediately clear to me that I wanted to be part of a solution. I heard that they need to raise 11,000 a day to start float. 1 in 3 deaths in this region will be seen and supported by hospice. 210 patients a month. The region from Farewell Spit, and on the other side of that, I've seen what happens when there isn't a hospice in play that can offer that care with mum. It became very clear to me it's easy to take things for granted, and I don't think you realise until it's not there. And so my motivation, even as someone who's new to the community, was just because it's great, don't assume it will always be great, and don't expect it to be great unless you're willing to put your hand up and do something about it. So, that was my drive. And the last 5 years I took up running. I run for my own professional and personal development. I test my resilience with running. I thought of the idea of running 210 kilometres, which was 50K more, which represents the number of dollars we wanted to raise, $210,000 from Farewell Spit. And the whole initiative was to bring the community with us. We run every kilometre in memory of a lost loved one. It's an remarkable organisation, but the key message was, don't sit back. It's okay to compliment someone. It's also okay to recognise someone, but what are you doing about it? What are you actually doing about it? And my view was, if I'm going to live here, sure as hell I'm going to do something about it. And whatever that means to me and my way was different than others. The run was phenomenal. I really struggled, but that was the point. If it was easy, it was the long distance. I learned a lot from that run. If it had been for me, I would have quit. I was doing it for the hospice. I was in a really bad way. If I was scared of failing, there's no chance I would have done it. Every bookie's money would have been, I will fail. I'd never run that far, and all signs are I can't run that far, but I did. A lot of people said, what's the maximum you can run? And I'm like, it's not 210. That's just the most I have been motivated to run. If it was 1,000, as long as I believe it. And that was the message I told myself the whole time. If I had to run for my family, I'd do it. If anyone had to do it for the family, they would. So stop defining what your limit is and just get clear on your why.
Yeah, mate, that's the goal. Stop defining what your limit is and get clear on the why. Absolutely.
The running culture is really interesting to me. There's this whole culture of did not finish. There's a real fear of failure, which I just don't agree with. For me, all the growth is in the failure. I've failed so many times in running, but that's why I've accelerated beyond those who think they're better runners, because it's not about my running. It's because I'm okay with missing. I'm not interested in aiming for something if there's not a high chance I'll miss it, because I want to see my response. I want to see my reaction, and I want to push on. And that was a really big motivation for me. And the one thing that sang out strong for my run was my crew.
Yeah.
I would have failed without them. And I really take that back to business a lot. I didn't make a decision in that run. My crew did.
Yep.
And I had to put a lot of faith in them. So it was an exercise of what do I need for my run? What are the skill sets? Where's the capability of my team? Get out of the way. And I've just got to bring that back.
You mean get out of the way for the team to do what they do?
Yeah, they're the experts. They're put there for a reason. Get out of the way.
That's a huge trick in business, really, isn't it? Get out of the way. Give the people the job and get out of the way.
Yeah, you know what you need and you get the right people. Yeah. Then why are you interfering? And if I had interfered, it all would have unwound.
J.P. Penny, who's a very wealthy American back in the 20s, he said, if you make every one of your board members a millionaire, and if you make every one of your employees a millionaire, then you'll never need for anything more in your life, you know? It's very much what you were saying, like get the right people around you and let them do what they do. It's a pretty important business philosophy, really.
And for me, that was where running came from. There's a few times in my life where I've walked away when it's got hard. So the first I run was 10K 5 years ago, so I signed up for 100K. I said, all right, let's test it.
Yep.
And it was bad, but I got it done. And I was like, all right, 160, let's go again. Failed. Not happy with my response. So I upped it to 200. Failed. Came back to 160, did it. And then back 24 and then 210. I want to see how I respond when I'm really struggling. I want to test, was that legitimate? This last run, I was broken through the night, but I never wanted to quit because it was legitimate. And so that's the thing. If you know what you're doing, you're not going to quit. You believe in it, and that's business, isn't it? So, yeah.
It absolutely is. And I can really relate to it, Ed. You know, we had an event here many years ago called the Rainbow Rage, and it was 106 Ks. I was a real estate agent. I was smoking too many cigarettes and eating pies with every client that I met, choffing coffees and having a great time. And I got this bee in my bonnet, decided I was going to do the Rainbow Rage. I bought a bike, did one training run, and then set out at 158 kilos, I did the Rainbow Rage, 106 kilos. And then I proceeded to do the Great Ride that year. And I know what you're saying. It's just about actually beating yourself. You know you can do this. You dig it in and you do it. So I've sort of, not to the same extent as you, but certainly I understand the experience of having to beat your own goal and just being relentless enough and unwilling to give up, you know?
Yeah, I embrace that space. There's a good runner in the US called Courtney Daughter. She thrashes all the guys. She's a legend. You can be fearful in an event or business of what happens when it gets hard. She's chasing that moment, her pain cave. She's just chiseling away. How far can I get into that cave without turning around? I want to go as deep as I can. It's so easy to say something, but when no one's looking, how do you respond? And are you willing to really test yourself and take it? Because if you can, you know, the concept from 5 years ago of saying I'm going to run 200 kins with 10 Ks is laughable. Like it was never good, but it happened. And for me, if I was setting up a business today, if I'm trying to be a good dad, whatever it might be, if it's legitimate and I'm committed, it will happen.
It only stops happening when you stop focusing. That's the thing. Everything only fails when you stop. You know, like you said, I failed on the 60, so I went for 200, then 100, 160, and then I failed on that, so I went back to 160 and I succeeded. You continually succeeded because you didn't stop. Like Isaac Newton was developing the incandescent light bulb, and he got a whole lot of investors. These investors were getting a bit agitated with him because he'd done 30-odd thousand experiments on how to build an incandescent light bulb. And the Boston newspaper interviewed him and said, your investors are pretty annoyed about this. You know, you've failed 30,000 times. When are you going to give up? And he said, I haven't failed 30,000 times. I've found 30,000 ways that do not work. I've taken them off the table. Right. And within another 3,000 or 4,000 tests, he'd actually found the incandescent light bulb and changed the future of humanity, really, by bringing that.
And that speed of growth, that's why I laugh with one of those events, you know, when I said I'm going to do 160K and I pulled out 130K and a DNF, that's what you did not finish. I was like, I've just put 30% on my PB. You know, I've just improved 30% overnight. And so for me, if I'd achieved a realistic goal, I was already slower than failing. You know, so I've always thought I can accelerate my career, sport, anything, aiming high, getting ego out of the way, accepting failure is part of it. It's just accelerating my growth and movement. Yeah.
Mate, that is such a great philosophy. It's an inspiring philosophy that people should hear and take on board. Unfortunately, so often we just go home and it all washes off in the shower. You'll know that from Sport Tasman. You give people good nuggets and good inspiration, and the key is to wake up tomorrow and remember, dig it in and drive. And that's the difference. You said it yourself earlier on. In the middle of the night when no one's looking, what are you thinking then? What counts then? Because that's really the only thing that matters.
Yeah. And the run was the perfect piece. All the lights were on for that weekend, but what happened the 6 months before? I probably did a fair bit of physical training for it, not enough. But I probably did 10 hours of visualization every single week, exactly what's going to happen when this happens, what's my response? There was no scenario that I hadn't already.
So nothing's left to chance. See, that's it. That's the detail on planning. That's what people don't recognize. Building a business, going for a 210K run, making a change, you have to get into the detail. You have to visualize every aspect of it. You can't leave anything to chance, and there can be no excuses.
No. The only bit I got wrong was my visualization of the finish. I thought it would play out different. I got to the end and I visualized my last 100 steps. And
how did you visualize them?
Get together for 40 hours. I'm going to see my wife, Olivia. I'm going to see my kids. I'm going to hold their hands. I'm a bit unsure whose hands to hold because I've only got 2 hands. I want everyone to feel right. I'm going to walk up Orphanage Creek. I'm going to allow myself to cry. Just fully download the emotion of it. I got there, nothing.
You just felt nothing. You were just depleted.
Nothing. Absolutely no emotion. Even though for the last 40 hours, I've been stifling myself from crying. Got there, nothing. Absolutely nothing. And it showed me you can't put your emotions on tap. I couldn't bottle them and then bring them on when I wanted. They were there earlier. So for me, one of the takeaways from it is that rather than trying to delay those emotions, actually
let them come
at the time, whereas I fought them. And then when I needed it at the end, there was nothing. So that was something I'm still digesting. What was good, bad, or different on that. But yeah, every other scenario, when I'm sick, this happens. When I'm tired, this happens. When I'm feeling down, this happens. It's a jigsaw for me. I need to get all the pieces, mainly through failure. And then I know I've got all the pieces and it's literally just applying them at the right time. Yeah.
Mate, that's magic advice. Eh? It's fantastic. So a marathon effort, almost literally, really, Ed. How long is a marathon?
26 miles or 42K.
42K, and you did 210K. So you did the equivalent of 5 marathons. Is that right?
Definitely.
5 marathons. I mean, that's just spectacular. 5 marathons over a 40-hour period. You know, I struggled with the 40-hour famine, just not eating for 40 hours. So, huge effort there.
I struggle with 40 minutes.
Huge effort. Tell me, what's your greatest achievement to date and what have you got coming? Is this your greatest achievement to date? Have you got more coming?
My greatest achievement is my
family?
100%. I'm proud that I've hit a level of maturity where I'm making good decisions.
Nice. I like that.
And I'm making good decisions for the future.
Yeah.
And the running's just a pocket of that, and that's my daily habits.
Yeah.
So I do try and paint a picture of what I want. Legacy is a big part for me because that's what my parents provided. They didn't have it. They've left me a legacy. My responsibility is to be that, to leave that legacy, to be a good ancestor. And so my discipline at the moment of what I'm trying to do and what I think I'm doing better is aligning what I do now with the 10-year plan or the 20-year plan. If I was thinking from a housing and property point of view, it'd be exactly the same. Don't expect outcomes in the future unless you're willing to do something now.
You got to know what your outcome is, don't you? You have to see it. One of my favorite stories of all time is a story, and she put up a picture and said, your grandfather saw the orange farm here in 1927 or whatever it was, and it was a black and white picture of an orange farm. And she put up another picture on the screen and she said, this is Disneyland in California today. And aren't you sad that your grandfather never got to see that? He looked at her and he said, my grandfather saw that the day he took that photo in 1927. The fact that my grandfather saw that on that day is the reason that everybody else can see that now. I think what you've said, the theme, if I take anything out of this, you've talked about visualization, you've talked about where you see yourself, how you see yourself achieving things. And I think the critical component there is that you actually take the time to envisage that, and then your behavior becomes consistent. So you have to live consistently with what you believe is the outcome or what you believe to be true. So it seems like a pretty straightforward philosophy, but very hard to live.
It's hard to live, but it's good. I think of my kids. My goal at the moment is when they, at any age, I want them to make decisions for themselves and not be influenced. I'm trying to give them those tools. That's got to start now, hasn't it? They're 7 on. It's already needed to start. I think, as I referenced earlier, it was 28 for me before I made the right decisions for the future.
Mate, you were just a spring chicken. I was like 50.
But there were distractions. So that's, my focus is giving those tools to my kids.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you got 2 kids.
2, Florence and Hugo. Then Florence is 9, Hugo 7. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. We got kids the same age.
Nice.
They're great motivators, I often look at them and think my humblers. They teach me humility and give me context on things that matter.
The night I went to sleep in a shaking mess after 210K, Hugo, my 7-year-old, walked in, winked and said, I'm going to run 211. And that was enough for me.
Good on you, mate. That's right. He's just going to one-upmanship on the old man. Why not? It's been fantastic to have you here. I've really appreciated you coming out, taking time out of your day. It really has been good to catch up with you, mate.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a really interesting. I mean, you know, you guys really in touch with your emotions, and I think that has allowed you to move through these journeys. You're not fighting with yourself, you're embracing it. And I think that's a really inspiring trait that we can all learn from. So sharing that.
No, thanks for the opportunity.
Cool, man. Awesome.